Coming up on this issue of Marlborough Magazine, the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority is building a 17-mile-long tunnel that goes right under our city. We'll tell you how this affects you. The construction on Main Street is almost completed. Ever since Marlborough has been on the map, Main Street has had several different looks. We'll give you a quick history lesson. These stories and more are in this month's issue of Marlborough Magazine.
I'm Susan Loffer, and I want to thank you for opening up another issue of Marlborough Magazine. This is our third installment of this show, but we still want your help. We already have a good group of personnel from the community helping to produce Marlborough Magazine, but we want you to help out too. If you are interested, give us a call at 508-481-1373 or email us at marlboroughmagazine@yahoo.com. As you may know, if you drive or walk down Main Street, the construction is almost completed. This latest facelift may have taken longer than expected, but as Dan Ginden tells us, changes are nothing new to this historic area of the city.
In 1666, a group of 13 men from Sudbury petitioned to start a new plantation west of their town. 4 years later, their request was granted, and Marlborough was named. For the next century, the town was a post road with stagecoaches traveling between Boston and New York. Churches and taverns were the only public buildings in town. Main Street itself evolved late in the last century, when in 1889, Marlborough became only the second town in the nation to own the newly invented electric streetcar. In 1890, the town passed a vote to become a city. Marlborough soon became the center of commerce. There were paved roads, banks, department stores, shoe factories, and social organizations. In 1891, Temple Block on Main Street was erected and was soon followed by the Warren Block, the Walker Building, and the Corey Block. The 20th century began on an ominous note when fire blazed through the rooms at City Hall. Despite this setback, rebuilding began and the First National Bank opened on Main Street, along with drugstores and the Marlborough Theater. In 1938, the prosperous small city was hit with another devastating blow. A hurricane whipped through the town without warning. There was $500,000 in damage done, which included the steeple being torn off of this church. Mayor William Morrow is a lifelong resident of Marlborough. He remembers when Main Street was the place to be in town.
I remember the Main Street as being a focal point for the residents. I mean, we had at one time 3 supermarkets on Main Street. We had a bus station down here where across from the police station, the intersection for the extension of Bolton Street is now. I remember a lot of activity, you know, during Thursday, Friday nights, come downtown shopping, and all your stores are open. There's a lot of retail stores at the time.
In the 1950s, 3 more hurricanes passed through Marlborough. Historians believe that the destruction from these storms led Marlborough into the urban renewal era, a period in the 60s when Main Street in Marlborough took on an entirely different look. It was a time when the city lost much of its historic past, with many old buildings being torn down to make way for newer, more modern buildings. In 1975, echoes from Town Hall's fiery demise haunted the city. Fire ripped through 2 historic blocks on Main Street, causing over $1 million in damage. 10 years later, in 1985, more changes came to the city. No historic buildings were lost, but many families lost their homes to another modernization. Granger Boulevard paved its way behind City Hall to help with traffic overloads on tiny Main Street. The extension was called an essential part of downtown Marlborough, but the families who lost their homes didn't see it that way.
There was a lot of animosity amongst the residents and the businesses also. You know, you displaced a lot of, well, not primarily residential, but some older businesses. I mean, I remember having two different lumber yards out in the back here. You had the train tracks going out to the back with the rail service. You know, you had the Enterprise newspaper up here on Liberty Street. And then when they put the Council of Aging and the elderly housing up there, they reconfigured that section with Liberty Street, I forget the other name of it, but going out in the back. So, you know, it displaced some homes in that particular area, but down back of the banks and it's back of City Hall, it was mostly businesses, and it was the old businesses that, like I say, the lumber yards, the coal companies and things like that you displaced. And this is what we had. I mean, the concept, I look at it today and I says, you know, I think they made a mistake personally.
Things stayed the same until the summer of 1999, when another new look was fashioned for Main Street. However, complications prevented the work from being completed. The engineering firm that was hired did not follow the proper guidelines.
And it looked nice on paper. But when they actually went out there and started to put the curbing in and having a certain inches of measurement of reveal on the curb versus the sidewalk or the street, it didn't meet the fascia of the storefronts. And it started leaving some 2 inches, 3, 4 inches in some locations of having a step going up into the storefronts. Unacceptable. That's when we stopped. And we closed it down that fall. And we, you know, had the pavement come in, put the hot top in the sidewalks, and we told the contractor, you're out until we get this thing squared away. And it took quite a while to go through the court system and get the new revised plan, and this is what we ended up with. It's working out very well.
It may be taking longer than they planned, but Main Street in Marlborough now has a cleaner, more inviting look. I'm Dan Ginden for Marlborough Magazine.
Good job, Dan. Thanks. Some people like to read the newspaper when they get up in the morning, and others like to read it in the afternoon or at night. None of these are options for the 190 legally blind citizens of Marlborough. They do have the option of having the news read to them by the volunteers at the Audio Journal, the radio reading service of Central Massachusetts. If you haven't heard about it before, now's your chance. Standing by is one of their volunteers who is well known on our airwaves. Around here, we just call him the Voice.
Thanks, Susan. Well, other than the Voice, I'm known as John Kulowick, and I like to have fun doing the Marlborough Shamrocks games, the play-by-play. But there's something else I like to use my voice for, something a little more serious. We're at the Audio Journal at 172 Lincoln Street in Worcester. The Audio Journal is a radio reading service for visually impaired. We read newspapers, magazines, and have other shows that pertain to visual impairment. It is a radio station that is broadcasting as part of TIC, the public radio service in Worcester, but they have their own frequency. And there's a little more than just walking in and going into the studio and reading the paper. There's a little bit of prep work to be done. So we'll take a walk into the prep room and I'll show you what you have to do. Okay, we're in the prep room right now. And I'll have to keep my voice down a little bit. I can't be hollering touchdown Shamrocks or anything like that. We're in the prep room. In this bookcase here are all the newspapers for the whole week. Now on Wednesdays, from 6 to 7 p.m., I do the Gardner News. This is the prep table. And basically, we take the whole week's worth of newspapers, line them up, start with the most recent paper first, and then we have to look at each article. If you go in the studio and sit at the microphone and read the paper, I've got my microphone on here, so I'm sure you hear the paper rustling. This is how it comes over on the radio. And I'm sure you can't hear me too good right now. So what we do is cut each article out of the paper. And it's a lot easier to handle and it's a lot quieter for the radio. The paper I was showing you before is the Gardner News, which I do. I don't want to cut that up now because it'll be another week before I have to do it. This is the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, which they read 3 times a day at the Audio Journal. This one is all ready to go, so I can just show you how they prep the newspaper. Of course, the Telegram and Gazette being a good-sized paper, they categorize it. This folder is all national news, and you can see each article. You know, many times it's continued on the back page. So this is the whole article. Then, as you read the article, even when you flip to the back page, you don't get the pages turning in the microphone. The lottery numbers, very important. And you can see this is national news, and this is just for one day. Tomorrow, the morning readers will come in. This will all be put in the recycle bin, and they'll start with tomorrow's paper. And like I said, this is just the national news. This whole crate is today's Worcester Telegram and Gazette. National news, opinions and commentaries, entertainment, peoples and places, advice columns, the business section, local and regional news, sports. Where's Dan Ginden? Well, the volunteers you just saw, Jonathan and Lucia, are reading the Blackstone Valley Tribune, and there are quite a few papers that the Audio Journal covers. The Audio Journal is always looking for volunteers. You give maybe an hour and a half a week, half an hour or so to prep the paper like I showed you, clipping it up, and then 1 hour reading. Very easy. There's no problem learning the controls. I learned in like 2 lessons and started doing the show myself. Now I have a partner. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, very, very small gift to people that could really use some help. The Audio Journal, as I said before, is located at 172 Lincoln Street in Worcester, and their number is 508-797-1117. Also, if you know somebody that could benefit from the Audio Journal, someone who has a hard time with print, you call that number, 508-797-1117, and they will arrange for that person to get a free receiver. You do need a special receiver. It's carried by WTIC, the National Public Radio in Worcester, but you need a special receiver to get it. But it's free. The Audio Journal will take care of you. So thanks for stopping by. It was really a pleasure to show you how everything works, and hopefully you'll be hearing the news from us pretty soon. Good night.
When Marlborough Magazine returns, we'll let you see what the MWRA's water supply tunnel looks like as it is being built underneath your city. You've fallen through the ice on your local lake. See what kind of training the Marlborough Fire Department has to go through in order to save your life. You are watching Marlborough Magazine. Marlborough Magazine will now continue. Here again is Susan Loffer.
Well, it's that time of year. Lakes and ponds freeze over, and that can be dangerous when you have kids and adults going out on thin ice. The Marlborough Fire Department has training every year to help save people who have fallen through the ice. We're going to go downstairs to our editing suites, where Dan Ginden is standing by with Captain Ron Ayotte. Dan?
Yeah, Susan, you're exactly right, because this is the time of year kids decide to go out and play on the lake. They don't always know how to test it and see if it is actually solid enough. That's why the Marlborough Fire Department has guys like Captain Ron Ayotte here. Ron, how you doing?
Fine, yourself?
Very good.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. Let's talk about that. First of all, just talk about the uncertainty of going out on a lake somewhere where it could be as deep as 15 feet, and you don't know how solid that is.
That is a problem. Most people don't believe how much water there is in the city of Marlborough. They think of water in Marlborough, they think of Lake Williams, Fort Meadow Reservoir, maybe the MDC Reservoir. There's also Milham, assorted small ponds and streams and brooks all over the city. Hager Pond down by the Sudbury line. We have a lot of water, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't use wise judgment when going out on the ice. Ice rescue is something that we don't do that often, but we have to be ready for it just in case.
Let's take a look at what Michelle did, and you can tell us what was going on with this.
What Michelle's wearing here is what we call an exposure suit. Basically, it is a rubber suit with a waterproof zipper system, and it's somewhat insulated. It allows a firefighter to enter cold water situations and basically stay afloat. There's air that's trapped in the suit, and as Michelle jumps in, you notice the air bubble up through. Now she's going to have to burp the suit to equalize the pressure, otherwise she'll be bobbing like a little cork up and down in the water. But that's also a safety factor for us because that enables us to stay on top of the water instead of ourselves sinking. The suits are supposedly waterproof, but they do leak on occasion. They get damaged. Even just going through ice, you can hit a piece of ice, and believe it or not, ice can be sharp. It can puncture a suit. Tiny pinhole leaks over the years can make people saturated. You get little wet spots here inside the suit. These are suits are also carried on a lot of fishing vessels. You see like a fishing boat go down, and they're in a life raft. They put on an exposure suit because they're exposed to the elements of the North Atlantic, which, although it doesn't freeze, the water can be just above the freezing temperature. And in this situation, there she goes, feet first, but you can see the buoyancy in the suit is allowing her to kind of float over to the location of the board. This is probably the hardest thing to do once a firefighter in an exposure suit is in the water, and that's to get out of the water. The orange, what looks like a highlighter pen or a magic mark here, those are actually ice picks. There's a spike inside of that, and to get out of the water, firefighter would grab this, literally drive it into the ice and just use sheer strength to pull oneself out of the water. What you see here is very thin ice that's breaking under the firefighter's weight. And Michelle's weight, what she's doing basically is finding her way till she gets to more solid ice. That's part of the problem because we don't know ice thickness. There's different types of ice. There's clear ice, which is usually the strongest but takes a long time to freeze. A milky opaque ice, which is not as safe. In the springtime, we get something called honeycomb ice, which appears to be thick, but actually it's all the dirt and sand that's been blown off the road over the years. And it actually, the sun hits it, this particles of grit and dirt sink through the ice. And what appears to be safe is actually, you can break it just by tapping it like this, like a piece of crystal. And that occurs a lot in the springtime. Here she's found a little piece of solid ice, maybe not that solid. And she's in again. They saw what we'll use for a board. It's an old surfboard. It's very effective in getting across the ice. But we don't want kids taking their boogie boards and their surfboards. Cowabunga, let's do this, it looks like fun. Because you may be in a wetsuit, but we're basically dry under there, and the biggest problem with ice rescue is people falling in. It's hypothermia. You lose body temperature 5 to 10 times quicker in water than you do in air. And once your body temperature starts dropping, your brain sends a signal to the rest of the body to shut down. You start losing their sense of touch because you can't, their fingers will go numb. They're going to have a hard time moving because basically the body's saying preserve yourself. It's preserving the blood flow to the heart and the lungs and the brain, 3 things that need it the most. And the danger about being on ice is not knowing how thick it is. We've had this weather pattern now where it's been cold a couple of days, warm a couple of days. This ice has been thawing, forming, thawing, forming. We haven't had a solid freeze. I have some basics on ice thickness and ice formation. Safest way to ensure your personal safety is, number 1, stay off the ice. Unless you know the area. You have people that go off ice fishing. They are in an unfamiliar area. They don't know if there are springs in the water. A natural underground spring that comes up, it weakens the ice. Flowing water is different. It may appear to be thick, but it's actually not. There's anchor ice, which is ice that's on obstructions. There's snow ice. It's milky and opaque looking. It's very weak. Someone can easily fall through. Frazzle ice is the initial ice crystals. What appears, you see in a puddle, it almost looks like you can see like snowflakes in the ice. That's ice forming. It takes a while for that to freeze solid. And how thick should ice be? If the ice is less than 1 inch thick, stay off. 2 inches can support 1 person. 3 inches can support a couple of cross-country skiers. 4 inches, 1 ice fisherman. 5 inches, 1 snowmobile. 6 inches, ice boating. 7 inches of ice, you can have group activities on it. Should be safe. 8 inches will support a car. 9 inches will support several snowmobiles, and 10 plus inches, you can drive a truck across it. The problem is, we don't know how thick the ice is.
Right.
Marlborough Fire Department does not go out and test ice thickness because we have a lot of water. First of all, we'd spend the entire day out there judging ice thickness. And there are some bodies of water that no one's supposed to be on anyways. Lake Williams is a water supply, Millham is a water supply. The MDC is private property owned by the Mass Water Resources Authority and MDC. Does it happen out there? It certainly does. We can't stop people. We can't patrol the lakes, and we can't control everything because it'd be virtually impossible. People should just use common sense. If you want to take your kids skating, there's always the Naven rink, there's the New England Sports Center. No one has ever fallen through the ice at a skating rink.
That's true.
There are numerous smaller ponds. Holtz Grove, which is only about 3.5, 4 feet deep at its max point. Is it safe? It can be after a hard freeze, but we don't advocate people going out onto the ice. Basically, it's at their own risk. We do these ice rescue drills to be ready. Now, this day was a warmer day. You can see it's raining.
What are they doing now here?
Basically, putting a victim on a board and using the firefighter, and we tie off to the board, is to actually push them out over to where we can get to them. It's not that easy. If we do recover people from the water, there are times where they say 90 minutes. After 90 minutes of being in cold water, you're looking at a body recovery. In winter, it's a different situation. There's a saying, you're not dead till you're warm and dead. The body has a natural occurring situation called mammalian dive reflex, which basically is a shutdown of all body systems with the exception of the heart, lung, and brains. They will try and revive a person, slowly rewarm them, bring up their body temperature, and eventually there have been some successful recoveries. There have been people, unfortunately, that end up being brain damaged from it, but all this can be avoided by just using a little bit of common sense and staying off the ice.
Well, we're going to go back up to the control room, and you know, Michelle Creswell has been through an awful lot. We've made her do a lot of things here at the station, and Susan, you better hope that we never make you do something like this.
Sure, Dan. I'll line up right behind you. Thanks, guys. In 1996, the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority began a $1.7 billion program to update our water supply tunnel. Here's Sandy Waterman with more.
Drinking water is a natural resource that you don't think too much about on a regular basis. Maybe you take it for granted. You turn on any faucet in your home and there it is. Perhaps you think so little about how lucky you are to have clean water that you don't even know that there is a pipe running under your city. It's called the Metro West Water Supply Tunnel. This 17.6-mile waterway carries drinking water to 43 different communities, including Marlborough.
It's pretty much all the communities around within Route 128 and towards the shore, and communities that run parallel to the Mass Turnpike, pretty much all the way out to the Wachusett Reservoir in Clinton.
Frank DePola is the Deputy Director of Construction for the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. He says that this project, which is scheduled for completion in 2003, was originally planned in the 1940s when our only source, the Hultman Aqueduct, was completed.
The MWRA is one of only one major metropolitan district that only has one supply conduit leading into its district. If the Hultman was to fail or have to be shut off for any reason, there'd be no water for 43 communities.
The MWRA's construction began in 1996, yet the first tunnel was completed in the late 30s. So why did this tunnel that was needed so badly get put off for over 50 years?
It was 1939, and shortly thereafter World War II started, and capital programs in the United States stopped for quite some time. And as years went by, and the state at the time, Metropolitan District Commission, didn't have the funds to continue these large capital efforts, residences built close to where the Hultman Aqueduct is located through these towns, And in the mid-1990s, when we were planning the second aqueduct, the idea of doing a large open trench 18 miles long through Southborough, Framingham, Wayland, and Weston, we felt that was not really practical or feasible at that time, so we looked at the tunnel alternatives.
We do live in a time where our vulnerability is a major concern. Contamination of our water supply has been a real fear since September 11th of 2001. David Gilmartin is a spokesperson for the MWRA, and he says that while nothing is impossible, the tunnel is quite safe.
In the first place, it would be very tough for a terrorist to contaminate a large body of water. You would need a tremendous volume of any kind of contaminant in order to do that. But having said that, we do tests every day. We do about 400 tests a week of drinking water, not only at the reservoir, but throughout the system. So we are in constant communication with laboratories and things like that, so we know exactly what the system is doing at any given point. The second thing that we've done is we've installed physical and electronic security all the way down the line. When somebody opens a hatch, we're going to know about it. We have video surveillance cameras, increased testing, locking down facilities, and having electronic monitoring are really our security program right now. It doesn't really involve having guards around reservoirs or things like that, because that isn't what we're looking to do.
The majority of the tunnel run is between 350 and 400 feet below ground. It's actually mined through the solid granite bedrock underlying eastern Massachusetts. And then the tunnel itself is lined with a minimum of 12 inches of reinforced concrete. In certain areas, we actually have a steel lining inside. Along the 17.6 miles of tunnel, there are several riser shafts that bring the water from the deep underground tunnel up to the surface, where we can tie into the local water mains to supply the water. Those shafts are enclosed in a reinforced concrete structure.
Contamination and other problems aren't just relegated to terrorist attacks. What about earthquakes and mineral deposits?
There was a seismic design criteria taken into account when we designed the tunnel itself. In certain areas where we knew that there was geologic features, fault zones, that could be a problem during a seismic event, that's where we actually added a welded steel liner through those sections, which provided some additional structural capacity in the tunnel itself.
Copper and lead comes from pipes in older homes, and the pH, if it changes, is going to allow some of that to leach into the drinking water in the house, but it's not in the system. And so what we advise people to do in areas where there is a lot of older construction, pre-1939 construction, we advise them to let the water run a little bit to mitigate that. But lead is not in the system, so we can help by changing the pH in the system, keeping it at a constant level, so it's not going to leach into the drinking water.
As you have found out by now, this tunnel is extremely long and carries water from all over the state. When you turn on your faucet to make some coffee or make dinner for your family, you might be asking yourself, where is my water coming from?
Your water in Marlborough starts out at the Swift River, or the watershed for the Quabbin Reservoir. Goes into the Quabbin and then flows into the Wachusett Reservoir, which is a 65 billion gallon reservoir, and then from there goes down the line and is given off to communities all the way down.
In return for being the host community, Marlborough has received additional funds to help improve the water and public works infrastructure. The MWRA has also contributed to the construction of a new water pump station. You don't need to worry about where your water bill is coming from. Gilmartin says that the MWRA is just a wholesaler. The city is still in charge of the billing.
We provide drinking water to the community. Then the community distributes it. They operate the distribution network, and they collect the bills from the individual homeowners and businesses. We assess them a fee based on a formula of how many millions of gallons that they use. We also do the same thing with wastewater, although the formula is a little more complicated because we take the strength of the sewage, we take the number of gallons that they give to us, and we also use the number of people that exist in the community, because they're all directly related to what we have to do to the sewage to process it. So simply put, we're just a wholesaler.
I'm Sandy Waterman from Marlborough Magazine.
If you have any questions regarding the Metro West Water Supply Tunnel, you can go to the MWRA's website at www.mwra.com. Well, that wraps up our latest issue of Marlborough Magazine. To get involved, call us at 508-481-1373 or email us at marlboroughmagazine@yahoo.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Susan Laufer. Thanks for watching.